Welcome, everyone. Today, we are going to tackle one of the biggest, most expensive problems in business right now. Why so many enterprise AI projects, despite all the hype and all the money, are basically set up to fail from day one. Let's get right into it.
So let's just start with a number. And honestly, this number should be absolutely terrifying to anyone in a leadership position. According to major league players like McKinsey and the Rand Corporation, a staggering 80% of AI projects never deliver real meaningful value. I mean, just let that sink in for a second. That's 4 out of every 5 projects.
You think that's bad? Oh, it gets so much worse. Research from MIT found that if you look just at the pilot projects, the initial tests that are supposed to prove if an idea even works, a mind-blowing 95% of them never make it into production. They get trapped in this place that people in the industry have a name for, pilot purgatory. And just to really hammer this home, a recent report found that 98% of companies have seen their machine learning projects fail. 98%! This isn't just some small hiccup, it is a full-blown systemic crisis. So the real question is, what is going on here? Why is this happening? Well, the popular myth, the thing everyone says, is that the tech just isn't ready yet, it's too complicated. But the reality? The data overwhelmingly shows that AI projects don't fail because of the code. They fail because of things that are much more human. Your strategy, your culture, your data, how you deploy things. It's an organizational problem, not a technology problem. So in this explainer, we're going to tear down this architecture of failure, piece by piece. We'll start in the boardroom with the strategic blunders. Then we'll dive into the data chaos that sinks projects before they even start. Navigate the absolute minefield of getting to production. Look at the critical human barriers. And then finally, we'll talk about how you can actually build an architecture for success. All right, let's start at the very top. The seeds of most AI failures are planted in the executive suite, way before a single data scientist is even hired. This is where flawed strategies and leadership blind spots set these projects on a collision course with reality. And at the core of it all is this cognitive bias, this mental trap called the readiness illusion. It's this completely flawed idea that just because you bought a fancy AI tool, your organization is suddenly ready to use it. Leaders just massively underestimate how much AI is going to shake up their existing workflows, their power structures, their entire company culture. And this illusion, well, it leads to some very predictable and very expensive mistakes. You see, companies buying a tool and then desperately trying to find a problem for it to solve. That's completely backwards. Or they let these little AI islands pop up in different departments, which just creates chaos and wasted money. They kick off these projects with no real way to measure success, which leads to what I think is a brilliant term, AI tourism. It's a lot of fun, a lot of experimenting, but you never actually arrive anywhere. The key thing here is strategy has to come first. Now, let's move on to the next major pillar of failure, and you'll see how these things stack up. Because even if you have the world's best strategy, your AI project is going to crumble if your data foundation is basically quicksand. We call this the knowledge chaos pathology. I love this quote because it just nails the problem. AI isn't some magic wand that cleans up your messy data. It's a giant megaphone that amplifies it. So if your company's internal knowledge base is a mess of conflicting information and outdated policies, guess what? A Gen AI model is just going to serve up that same chaos to you, but with a whole lot more confidence. And you see this everywhere. Critical data is stuck in dozens of different old systems. Models get fed stale documents that are suffering from content rot, and nobody can trace where the information actually came from. This is a huge part of what happened with the infamous IBM Watson for Oncology project. It was this multi-billion-dollar failure, and one of the key reasons was that it was trained on synthetic, perfect hypothetical patient data, not the messy, complicated real-world data of actual patients. Okay, so let's imagine you've got a great strategy, you've got clean data, you're still not out of the woods, not even close. You now have to cross what we call the perilous path to production. And this is where a model that works beautifully in a nice, clean lab environment just completely falls apart when it hits the chaos of the real world. And this right here, this visual, it illustrates a fundamental truth that most people just get totally wrong. Making machine learning work in the real world isn't really about the cool algorithm code. I mean, look at that. That's maybe 5% of the total effort. The other 95%, the vast majority of the work, is all the boring, complicated stuff around it. The data pipelines, the monitoring, the versioning, the whole infrastructure. And managing that giant 95% chunk, Well, that has a name. It's a whole discipline called MLOps, or machine learning operations. And it's not just some buzzword. It is the entire operating system you need to make sure your AI systems actually work reliably, at scale, and keep making good decisions over time. Without good MLOps, you fall into these really dangerous traps. There's something called train-serve skew, which is just a fancy way of saying the data the model sees in the real world looks nothing like what it was trained on. But even scarier is this concept of silent failure. This is where a model's performance just slowly gets worse and worse over time, but it never sends an error message. It just quietly starts giving you that information, and your business starts making terrible decisions based on it. And that brings us to our last, and, I would argue, the most important reason for failure: the human element. Because even if you get the strategy, the data, and all the tech perfectly right, a perfect AI system is completely worthless if nobody actually uses it. Now, this is a real shocker for a lot of people. Research from Prasi shows that the single biggest point of failure for AI isn't the technology, and it's not the data. It's a user proficiency crisis. Basically, people's ability and their willingness to use these tools is responsible for 38% of failures. That's more than double the technical challenges. So that begs the question, right? Why? Why are employees resisting these incredibly powerful new tools? It's not because they're lazy or don't want to learn. The resistance is coming from a much deeper, much more human place. It really boils down to fear. It's the fear that their job is on the line, that their skills are about to become obsolete. It's about a loss of control, especially for managers who see AI as a threat to their authority. It's a lack of trust in these black box systems that can't explain how they made a decision. And frankly, it's a huge failure of leadership to provide the training and support people need to feel safe through this change. Okay, so we have spent a lot of time deconstructing the architecture of failure. So how do we flip this? How do we start building an architecture for success? What are the few organizations that actually get this right doing differently? Well, they follow something called the 10-20-70 rule. And if you take away only one thing from this entire explainer, please let it be this. The best performing organizations, they spend only about 10% of their effort on the actual algorithm. 20% goes to the tech and the data infrastructure. And the massive majority, 70%, is dedicated to the messy, complicated human stuff: the people, the process changes, and the cultural shift. So the key takeaways here are pretty clear. Getting everyone in the organization on the same page is way more important than having the fanciest algorithm. Your data quality is the absolute foundation for everything else. You have to focus on business outcomes, not just on building cool models. And always, always, always start with a real high-value business problem, not with a shiny new AI tool. I really want to leave you with this quote from Ginny Rometty, the former CEO of IBM. It just frames the whole challenge perfectly. The real threat isn't that some robot is going to take your job. The real threat is that another person who knows how to use AI is going to take your job. Getting this adoption piece right isn't just a nice to have, it's a strategic imperative. Which brings us to our final question for you. As you think about your own organization and everything we've talked about today, ask yourself, are you building an architecture for success by focusing on the strategy, the data, and most importantly, the people? Or are you accidentally repeating the same patterns that create an architecture for failure? Thanks for watching.